2020 has just been an absolute write-off, hasn't it? After 3 months of total lockdown in the UK, even a hermit like me wanted to get outside the house and do a bit of exploring. If you hadn't guessed it by my glorious accent, I'm from the northeast, more specifically Middlesbrough, which has been voted the worst place to live in the UK not once but twice by a group of southerners that have probably never even visited the place. Anyway, I thought I could kill two birds with one stone and go out for a decent adventure and also prove that it's not as much of a shithole up here as everyone thinks it is. Let's get into it. Now what do we have right on our doorstep up here? Well, apart from the River Tees and some of the country's best beaches, we've got the North York Moors, and wrapped over the undulating hills is a route known as the Cleveland Way. 110 miles of ups and downs spanning its way across the dense moorland and all the way down the northeast coast. It's a popular route with ramblers, but the problem is I've never really been a big fan of just going for a walk. However, throw a bike in the mix and things sound a hell of a lot more fun. So inspired by Captain Tom, I thought it was time for me to play my part in raising a bit of money for people that might be struggling during this batshit year by challenging myself to cycle it. And well, it's hard graft, I'll tell you that. The only real preparation I did was buy a pair of cycling shorts and a couple of inner tubes. Admittedly, having a mooch around some of the areas that I was unfamiliar with or doing a bit of training would have probably been a bit more beneficial, but before Boris had the chance to lock us all back up again, I decided to just go for it. I'd be starting off in Helmsley and then working my way north, ticking off a handful of local landmarks before scrambling over at the coast and hugging the shoreline all the way down to Filey. And thankfully there was a gap in the classic British summer weather where it actually stopped raining for a couple of days, so I took that as a sign that I should probably set off. Now you might be thinking, look, are you using an electric bike? And the answer to that is I bloody wish I was. Nope, I was going to be pedalling all the way on my trusty old Giant Trans SX, which was powered off whatever I had for breakfast rather than a 500 watt-hour battery. Because I'm stupid and I left this challenge until mid-October rather than doing it a couple of months back when it was bone dry, that meant that the entire route was going to be moist at best, and I quickly learned, maybe after a kilometre or so, that gates and steps were going to be a right pain in the arse. But the only other slight niggle I had in the back of my head was that I didn't actually have a clue where I was going. I'd heard that the route was well signposted for walkers, but when you're blasting down a road at 20 or 30 mile an hour, it's a lot easier to miss them. Now I knew there were some spots on this route where I wanted to stop off and get the drone out, and I took that into consideration when I was planning the ride, but there were places like this that I stumbled across and I couldn't help but stop for a quarter of an hour just to send it up in the sky. It was absolutely stunning, and I proved that you can fly the Mavic Mini in light rain as well. Not a test I intended on doing on a charity bike ride, but hey ho. Speaking of charity, let me just quickly remind you that all of this is for a great cause. 2.5 million British children are now living in food insecure households, and food banks are the only option that some families have to provide a healthy diet for the kids. Local food banks are generally run by volunteers and rely upon monetary and food donations to keep afloat, so any money that I raise will be passed straight over to the guys running the food bank in Whale Hill, which is the area where I grew up. That's me in all of me Whale Hill clobber. Phew. Smart as a carrot. If you'd like to donate, I'll leave a link to the JustGiving page down in the description. If you want to but can't, maybe share the video with your mates instead. It's all much appreciated. Anyway, here I am about 2 kilometres into the ride. Got it. Going on here. Insert meme of Queen going, cows! Cows! So, as you can probably tell, I was in good spirits, but it wasn't long before my lack of knowledge about the trail kinda let me down. At least I don't have to lift the bike over this one. I mean, if I had to guess, I'd say I'm probably going the wrong way, but maybe it is the right way. We'll keep on going. Oh, I made it to the top. It says North York Moors Bridle Way. I don't think this is the right way because it normally has the little yellow arrow on. I can go this way for a little bit. I think I'll have to go back down and onto the stream, but I can't be asked doing that, so see where this way takes us. If anything, I'm going to do more miles than what the Cleveland Way is, so don't start whinging. Yeah, just looked on the map. Wrong way. And that was a 20-minute mistake. Back to the bridge. That was when I got a little bit confused about the yellow arrow on the bridge, so there was a bit of head scratching, swearing and pointing, but I figured things out and got back on track. Oh no. This fella's knackered. Alright. Come here.
You right? You stay there, mate. You alright? Can't fly. Just shit on me, the little bastard.
After wiping the bird crap off me glove and ascending another virtually unrideable cobbled track, I found myself in my first field full of sheep, but none of them seemed that bothered, especially this guy. Once I'd finished fighting with the next gate, it was another long drag uphill avoiding the local farmers.
Ooh, that fucking stinks.
Until I reached Cold Kirkby, where I could have bought some flapjack from this nice little hut in the village if I'd have thought to bring some coinage with me, but I didn't, so I'd have to settle for some Haribos and this way overpriced protein bar. Anyway, I ploughed on and I finally reached the summit of Sutton Bank.
Like a viewpoint. Jesus, check that out.
This was actually one of the places I'd planned to stop and get the drone out, but unfortunately it was a little bit cloudy and overcast. The views were still worth the energy draining slog up the bank though, and the ride across the top of the hills heading over to the next checkpoint were probably some of the nicest paths on the entire route. I even made a friend.
Hiya, bud. Hiya, mate. Hiya.
The late night Heinekens and the lack of training though were coming back to bite me as I started to cramp up only about 19 or 20k into the ride.
Right, so just gone past the sign now, 3 mile away from Osmotherley, which is a place I wanted to be about half an hour ago, to be honest, so I'm a little bit behind, but nice reservoir that, so I'm going to stop off, get the drone out, I'm going to crack on. I swear to God, if I'm going to do this cycle again, I'm going to do it in reverse because it's all bloody uphill. Got to be mad. First bit of downhill you get. Bloody gate in the way.
So Strava's saying that I've done about 18 kilometres so far. Feels like I've done a lot more than that. I think it's just because it's been all uphill pretty much. There's a few downhill sections now, I think. So hopefully I'll be able to rack some miles up without having to pedal so much. I'm absolutely knackered now. I've just had to stop and have a quick bite to eat and a drink. There's about 10 miles, 15 miles to go I think to get to Captain Cook's Monument, and that's another steep incline, and then same again with Rosebery Topping, and then same again over the top of Highcliffe. So legs started to cramp up a little bit earlier on, but yeah, I'm going to crack on now. I'll see you at the next stop. I trundled on and racked up the next few kilometres along a track that I think is known as the Hambleton Drive Road, before undoing all the hard work I did earlier on and bombing down the far side, praying that I didn't pick up a puncture off that sharp gravel. It was nice to carry a bit of speed without having to stop and open a gate up for once, but I was about to be slowed right down again by more steps. Now I knew that the Cleveland Way had some sections that were strictly footpath only, but I'd completely missed the sign telling me at the top of this path, so if you are planning on doing this route, which let's be honest, you probably aren't, make sure that you're a bit more vigilant than I was, just to make sure you don't piss anyone off. Eventually I made it to Osmotherley. I had to go slightly off route to get to Codbeck, but it was worth it to show off this little gem of a spot. Please don't come and visit though, I like it when it's quiet. After a quick whiz about with a Mavic and a lap around the reservoir on the bike, I had to find out where I could link back up to the route that I was taking, and of course it was behind another bloody gate.
Cleveland Way. Cooking on gas now.
I was, but the nice blast through the trees and refreshing water splash was short-lived though, as the uphill began to show itself again.
I hate hills. Anyone who can ride up here, send me a video and I'll give you 100 quid. Fucking hell. I feel like I'm gonna shit myself.
That climb definitely took its toll, and even though it was quite a pleasant ride over to the nab, I was running low on things to keep my energy levels up. So after I made it up to the top, I made the decision to drop back down into a village via these absolutely lethal steps to bring an end to the first leg, before mine completely gave up on me. Day 2 kicked off quite nicely. The sun was breaking through the morning mist and it was a quick 5k pedal on some nice flat roads for a change before I eventually joined back up with the Cleveland Way. I followed the route up through Bankside Farm and luckily the road was tarmacked all the way to the top since it had rained overnight. Once the hill levelled out it was only a short stint over some rougher terrain before Captain Cook's monument showed its face. It's a shame it was blowing a gale up there because I wanted to get the drone out here and at the next spot I was heading to as well, but I guess you win some and you lose some. I was super happy with the way that the bike was soaking up all of the harsh bumps, especially on these big flagstones. I just had to make sure that I didn't sink a tyre in between two of them because I'd have gone absolutely flying. And it was a good laugh picking up some speed on the descent down towards Rosebery Topping too. But between me and Rosebery was another climb, and because I wanted to stick on the Cleveland Way where I could, that meant hiking up some steps rather than taking the gravel track that loops up around them. It didn't take long after ascending those cobbled stairs though to reach the next landmark of the route. I've pinched someone else's footage since I couldn't send my drone up, but I didn't stop for long as I was desperate to get over towards the coast before midday. The trails up here had been baking all morning, so I could really get a shift on, and it was like that for the next few kilometres or so before it switched back to gravel. I could see exactly where I wanted to be going next, so I got my head down, pedalled like hell, and before I knew it I was in Gisborough Woods. Now I thought I knew my way around here, but I must have missed a turn because instead of heading up over the top of Highcliffe, which seemed to be in almost reaching distance, I ended up pedalling the long way around. There was a very picturesque little pond that I would have missed out on if I did go the right way, but beyond that was another couple of boggy inclines and paths, and once my treads had clogged up, it was a case of having to get off the bike and push it to the top, where I actually stumbled across the route that I should have been on. I finally found the right path. This is the Cleveland Way now. The bit that I was on wasn't. I think I'd taken a left turn when I should have gone uphill, but back on it now. From there it was a quick blast through the woods before I crossed over the first main road that I'd seen throughout the entire trip so far. Look at that. Looks like Windows 97. What if I told you I got lost again? To be fair, it's probably not going to shock you by this point. Somehow I followed these fields into the wrong village. I was in Boosbeck instead of Skelton. This definitely isn't the right way. Oh, you bastard. So, where do I go? Well, go the right way, you plank. After a quick check on Google Maps, I did get back on track. That's where we are right now. Let's keep going. Once you find the path, it takes you directly through the centre of Skelton High Street before dropping you through an underpass and popping you out underneath Saltburn Viaduct, which is Rex's favourite place to go for a good old swim. But you've got to work your way back up past the little elf's house. They're in. Before you can freewheel down through the Valley Gardens. This is the place that I wanted to reach by the end of day 1. I'd massively underestimated not just the elevation changes during the first half of this ride, but the terrain as well. Wet, slippy rocks on a 20% gradient hill are just impossible to ride up, and I spent a lot more time walking beside my bike than I expected. But I wasn't in a rush. Yeah, it was a challenge, but I wanted to take in part to the local area that I'd never seen before as well. So after scranning a full box of carbs to keep my legs working, I ventured off the pier and up onto the cliff tops. I was feeling a lot better today, and it was just as well because as soon as I got to the top, the wind was working against me. Still, I made short work of the next 6 kilometres, and before I knew it, I'd reached, passed through and climbed back up the far side of Skinning Grove. I barely saw anyone on this stretch apart from the odd person who made the "you should have got an e-bike instead, mate" comment. I'm not complaining though, it just meant that I didn't have to worry about mowing down any walkers when I was skipping over these worn trails. A few fields later, after descending down from Bulby Cliffs, I hit Stades, a little fishing village that I'd never actually visited before. It's just a scaled down version of Whitby really, might even be a bit nicer. The wind started to die down a bit, so I thought I'd best make the most of it and crack on. Obviously, the way I needed to go meant going uphill and through a gate just for a laugh, but even though I was still full of energy, my GoPro batteries were dead, and it wasn't until I got to the next stop that I realised that I'd been racking up the miles without actually filming anything. So instead, I'll pick it up at the start of the next morning. Yep, that's right, we're now in Whitby. It was a bit of a later start than I would have liked, but I had to take an unplanned trip to the vets on the morning with a pooch after he decided to just stop breathing on us, you know, just to keep us on our toes. I climbed up the 199 steps and cycled past the Abbey to start the day off before turning down the Cleveland Way footpath. Yep, that's right, public footpath, not bridleway. When I took a glance down the track, there was a sea of pensioners walking down there, and it was only wide enough for single file traffic, so there was no way I was squeezing past a lot of them. Luckily enough for me though, there's a cycle route that runs alongside the footpath called the Cinder Track, and you can really start cranking out the miles on it. It takes you through all of the same places you go on the Cleveland Way, but literally no one's walking on it. I checked off Robin Hood's Bay and Ravensky in no time, and don't get me wrong, it is a lot easier to churn out the miles on gravel rather than mud and grass, but the hills hit just as hard. Fuck it now. Whoa. So, soaking wet and covered in mud, I arrived in Barbados. I'd done nearly 30k in 2 hours, so I'd more than made up for the lost time at the start of the day. I could also send the drone up here without having to worry about decapitating any seagulls like I was in Stathers and Whitby. The sun came out to play as well, which was nice, and Scarborough was the last place I'd be stopping, because the next time I wanted to take my feet off the pedals was at the finish line in Filey. So I packed up and set off with my eyes on the prize of an ice-cold beer. Of course, I had to work for it though. It couldn't have been a nice easy stretch, could it? Down onto the beach before rising back up one of the steepest hills known to man. It felt like it anyway. But it wasn't stopping me. I was a man on a mission. Come on, son, come on. And before I knew it, I was there.
That's it. That's it. Get in.
I sound well chuffed, don't I? I was, honest. 175 kilometres completed, albeit spread over 3 days rather than the 2 like I was planning. I don't think I'll be tackling another challenge like this for a while, to be honest, but if you enjoyed it, maybe check out the channel, leave the video a like, and maybe even consider subscribing. Remember, all of this was for a good cause, and I'll put the links to the JustGiving page down in the description if you'd like to make a contribution. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!